Ready for a deep dive into the brain?
Always.
Okay, good. We're looking at a study that's kind of shaking things up.
You.
Yeah, shaking up how we understand movement. Yeah,
Mhm.
at least how the brain controls movement.
Interesting.
It's all based on a recent article from Neuroscience News.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's about some pretty groundbreaking findings that were published in the journal Neuron. Yeah, and
Nice.
get this. The brain might be controlling movement in a totally different way than we thought.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, it really challenges the traditional model, that's for sure.
Yeah, so for those of us who aren't neuroscientists,
Right.
let's start with a little Neuroscience 101.
Okay, sure.
What was the old way of thinking about how the brain controls movement?
Well, the classic view was that different brain regions had, very distinct roles.
Okay.
So imagine you're reaching for a glass of water,
Okay.
the striatum,
Okay.
which is a key part of a larger structure called the basal ganglia, was thought to be responsible for deciding, quote, I want that water,
Yep.
essentially choosing the what of the action.
Okay.
Then the motor cortex takes over, and it's figuring out how the specific muscle commands needed to actually reach and grasp the glass.
Okay, so a neat division of labor.
Yeah.
Striatum for decision-making,
No.
motor cortex for execution.
Exactly.
But this new research is saying that's not the whole story.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
Scientists started noticing hints that the striatum might be doing more
Okay.
than just deciding what to do.
Interesting.
For one, the striatum has, extensive connections to the motor system,
Right.
which suggested it might be involved in the mechanics of movement itself.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If it's communicating with the parts of the brain that directly control muscles, it must be playing some role in the movement process.
Right. And then there was the puzzle of movement disorders like Parkinson's disease.
Okay.
People with these conditions often struggle with the how of movement, initiating actions, coordinating their limbs, but they still understand what they want to do.
So the striatum, which was supposed to be all about the what, is somehow implicated in movement execution problems.
Yeah,
That seems like a pretty big clue that something's missing from the traditional model.
exactly. And that's what led these researchers at Ganglia to design this really, really ingenious experiment to try and tease apart what was really going on.
Okay, so tell me about this experiment.
Yeah.
I read they used something called a reach-to-pull system.
Right.
What does that even mean?
So in this system, mice were trained to reach for and pull a joystick to get a reward.
Okay.
The clever part is they had two very subtly different joystick positions.
Oh, boy.
So the mice still had to reach and pull,
Okay.
but the precise way they had to position their paw was slightly different in each case.
Why was that small difference so important?
Because they were trying to isolate the neural activity related specifically to the how of the movement.
Okay.
By keeping the overall goal the same, reaching and pulling,
Right.
they could focus on those subtle differences in execution
Gotcha.
and see how the striatum and motor cortex were responding.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's like controlling for the what and zooming in on the how at a neural level.
Precisely.
Ugh.
And to capture this neural activity,
Right.
they used a technique that allowed them to record from both the striatum and the motor cortex simultaneously
Wow.
in these mice.
Okay.
They were essentially eavesdropping on the conversation between these two brain areas during those subtly different movements.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they find when they looked at this neural data?
What they found was remarkable.
Right.
Both the striatum and the motor cortex showed similar patterns of activity during both versions of the reach-to-pull action.
Wow, okay.
This means both areas were involved not just in the decision to reach, but also in those fine-grained details of how that reach was carried out.
So it's not a clear-cut division of labor after all.
Right.
The striatum isn't just deciding, I'm going to reach. It's also actively involved in shaping the precise way that reach unfolds.
That's right. It's almost like the striatum is working in concert with the motor cortex,
Okay.
fine-tuning the execution of the movement in real time.
Okay.
And this has some pretty big implications for how we think about movement control in general.
All right, I'm ready to unpack those implications.
Yeah.
What does it really mean that the striatum is involved in this fine-tuning of movement?
Well, on a basic level, it means we need to rethink the striatum's role.
Okay.
It's not just a decision maker, it's a key player in the mechanics of movement, ensuring actions are smooth, precise, and adapted to the situation.
So instead of a simple on-off switch,
Right.
it's more like a sophisticated control system, constantly making adjustments to optimize how our movements unfold.
Yes. Think of it this way. The striatum receives a lot of sensory feedback.
Okay.
It knows where your limbs are in space, it's getting information about muscle tension, and it's integrating all of that information to fine-tune the ongoing movement.
But wait, if both the striatum and the motor cortex are involved in specifying these movement details, isn't that kind of redundant? Like two chefs trying to make the same dish?
That's a great question, and it's something the researchers are still investigating.
Okay.
One possibility is that these two areas are actually contributing different aspects to the overall movement plan.
Okay.
They might be processing information differently or influencing different muscle groups.
So maybe it's less about redundancy and more about specialization.
Right.
Like different instruments in an orchestra playing different notes,
Yeah,
but all contributing to the same symphony.
that's a good analogy.
Okay.
It's possible the motor cortex might be laying down the basic blueprint of the movement,
Okay.
while the striatum adds the nuances and refinements based on sensory feedback and the desired outcome.
This whole idea of the brain working like a team of specialists to produce even simple movements is fascinating.
It is. And the researchers even have a term for this. They call it partial agents.
Partial agents.
Yeah, it's this concept that different brain regions can act as specialized units, each contributing their own piece to the puzzle of behavior.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the theoretical weeds,
Okay.
I want to bring it back to something you mentioned earlier,
Yeah,
the implications for movement disorders.
right.
How does this research change how we think about conditions like Parkinson's?
This is where things get really interesting from a clinical standpoint.
Okay.
The traditional approach to Parkinson's has been to focus on replacing lost dopamine.
Okay.
That's because Parkinson's is characterized by the death of dopamine-producing neurons in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra,
Okay.
which is closely connected to the striatum.
So the idea was if you boost dopamine levels, you can help restore normal movement.
Right. And while dopamine replacement therapy can be effective,
Right.
it often comes with side effects
Yeah.
and doesn't fully address all the motor symptoms.
Right.
But if the striatum is involved in this fine-tuning of movement,
Right.
maybe we need to look beyond just dopamine.
I see what you're saying. If the problem isn't just a lack of dopamine, but a disruption of the striatum's ability to refine movement,
Right.
then maybe we need therapies that specifically target those fine-tuning mechanisms within the striatum itself.
Exactly. It opens up a whole new avenue for treatment,
Wow.
focusing on improving movement execution
Yeah.
rather than just action selection. It's a
Okay.
really exciting possibility.
This is such a mind-blowing deep dive.
It is.
We've gone from thinking of the striatum as a simple decision maker to seeing it as a key player in the mechanics of movement itself.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This research raises some even bigger questions
Like what?
about how our brains work.
Ooh, like what? Don't leave me hanging.
If movement arises from this coordinated effort of many partial agents in the brain,
Yeah.
each contributing to the how of an action, what does that tell us about the nature of free will and conscious control?
Whoa. Deep. That's definitely something to ponder. Let's take a moment to digest all this incredible info
Okay.
and then come back to explore those deeper questions in part 2.
Sounds good.
Okay.
It really makes you wonder if movement is orchestrated by this, intricate interplay of different brain regions, each with its own role to play. Where does our sense of conscious control fit into all of this?
Right. I mean, we covered the groundbreaking study, the implications for treating movement disorders, but this whole partial agents concept and how it relates to free will, it's sending my brain into a bit of a spiral.
It is a complex idea. The study itself doesn't offer definitive answers on free will,
Right.
but it definitely provides a fresh perspective on how our brains generate behavior.
So maybe it's not as simple as like, quote, I decide to reach for that water and then my arm just obeys. It's more like a team effort happening in my brain, with different areas potentially even influencing the decision itself.
That's the idea. This actually connects with previous research on something called action preparation.
Oh, okay.
Scientists have known for a while that our brains actually start preparing for actions
Okay.
before we're even consciously aware of making a decision.
Wait, really? So my brain could be gearing up to reach for that glass of water before I've even registered that I'm thirsty.
That seems counterintuitive. But think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. Our ancestors needed to react quickly to survive. Having the brain prepare for potential actions even before a conscious decision is made
Right.
could have been a huge advantage.
So it's like my brain is always running simulations in the background,
Right.
ready for whatever might come next.
That's a great way to put it. And this new research on the striatum adds another layer.
Okay.
It suggests that those partial agents
Right.
involved in movement preparation
Okay.
might not be limited to the motor cortex.
Right.
The striatum might be part of the action too, shaping our movements before we're fully aware of our intentions.
Okay. My brain is trying to keep up.
Yeah.
If different parts of my brain are involved in planning and executing actions, maybe even before I consciously decide, does that mean I'm not really in control?
That's a big question. Philosophers and scientists have been debating for ages.
Right.
This research doesn't give us a clear answer,
Okay.
but it certainly encourages us to rethink our understanding of control and free will.
So where does that leave us non-neuroscientists? Should we just throw up our hands and say, like, our brains are calling the shots, so we're not responsible for our actions?
That seems a bit extreme, don't you think?
Yeah.
Even if our actions are influenced by, unconscious processes,
Right.
we still have a sense of agency. We experience ourselves making choices
Right.
and taking action.
So it might not be in either situation.
Right.
Maybe free will and this idea of partial agents can coexist.
That's a compelling possibility. It's likely more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Our conscious intentions and this intricate neural activity probably work together in ways we're just beginning to grasp.
That's actually kind of reassuring.
Yeah.
It feels like I do have some say in what I do,
Yeah,
even if my brain is doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work I'm not aware of.
exactly. This research doesn't negate our experience of free will.
Yeah.
It just adds a layer of complexity
Mm-hmm.
to our understanding of how our brains generate behavior.
All right, so we've tackled the study, the implications, and even delved into some profound philosophical territory.
Right.
Before we wrap up,
Okay.
I want to loop back to what we discussed earlier
Yeah.
about how this research could revolutionize treatment for movement disorders.
Right.
Can you tell me more about that?
Of course. As I mentioned, the traditional approach for conditions like Parkinson's has been to focus on increasing dopamine levels.
Okay.
Because Parkinson's involves the loss of dopamine-producing neurons in the substantia nigra,
Right.
a part of the brain that works closely with the striatum.
The idea being that replacing that lost dopamine could help restore normal movement.
Right, and while dopamine replacement therapies can be helpful,
Right.
they often have side effects
Yeah.
and don't fully address all the motor symptoms.
So this new understanding of the striatum's role in movement could lead to different, maybe more effective treatment approaches.
That's the hope. If we can figure out how to directly target those fine-tuning mechanisms within the striatum itself,
Mm-hmm.
we might be able to move beyond just dopamine replacement.
Or at least supplement those treatments with therapies that specifically address the striatum's role in movement execution.
Exactly. This opens up so many possibilities
Yeah.
for developing targeted therapies that could dramatically improve the lives of people with movement disorders.
What a remarkable example of how basic research can lead to real-world benefits.
It really underscores the importance of pushing the boundaries of our understanding of the brain.
Yeah.
Who knows what incredible discoveries are waiting just around the corner?
Well said. This has been an incredible journey into the world of neuroscience.
It has.
I don't know about you, but my brain is definitely buzzing.
Mine too. This study is a powerful reminder that the brain is an incredibly complex and fascinating organ,
Mm-hmm.
and we're only beginning to uncover its secrets. This research doesn't just tell us about how the striatum works.
Right.
It challenges our core assumptions about the brain, behavior, and even the very nature of consciousness.
I think I need a moment to process all of this.
Yeah.
But seriously, this has been an amazing deep dive. I hope you're feeling as mind blown as we are out there.
I hope so too. And if you're left with more questions than answers, that's a good thing. It
Yeah.
means you're engaging with the material,
Right.
thinking critically, and maybe even starting to see the world in a new light.
And who knows? Maybe one of you listening will be the next neuroscientist to make a groundbreaking discovery about how our brains work.
That's the beauty of science. It's a continuous journey of exploration and discovery. Who can say what incredible insights await as we continue to unravel the mysteries of the brain?
Well said. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of neuroscience.
Okay.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.
And keep exploring.
I'm still kind of reeling from the idea that even seemingly simple actions, like reaching for a glass of water, involve this incredible coordination of different brain areas, each with its own specialized role.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? This research really highlights the elegance and complexity of the brain's design.
It makes you wonder if this partial agents framework uh, applies to other aspects of behavior beyond just movement.
Right.
Could it be that our thoughts or emotions or even our sense of self arises from this intricate interplay of different brain regions?
That's a fascinating question and one that researchers are actively exploring. There's growing evidence that many cognitive functions, from decision-making to language processing, involve the coordinated activity of distributed brain networks.
So instead of thinking of the brain as having a single command center,
Right.
it's more like a decentralized system, with different regions constantly communicating and collaborating to produce what we experience as a unified sense of self.
That's a compelling way to think about it. This idea of a decentralized brain challenges the traditional view of a singular self controlling our thoughts and actions. It suggests a more dynamic and emergent model where consciousness arises from the complex interplay of specialized neural networks.
This reminds me of something we touched on earlier, the concept of action preparation.
Right.
If our brains are already gearing up for actions before we're even consciously aware of them,
Right.
does that mean our conscious intentions are just playing catch-up? Are we just passengers in our own bodies?
That's a question that has puzzled philosophers and scientists for centuries. This research doesn't provide definitive answers, but it does suggest that the relationship between our conscious intentions and our brain's activity is far more intricate than we previously thought.
So maybe it's not a matter of conscious versus unconscious control,
Right.
but rather a dynamic interplay between the two.
Yeah.
Our conscious intentions might set the overall goals,
Yeah.
while our brains, with their specialized networks and unconscious processes, figure out the best way to achieve those goals.
That's an intriguing possibility. It suggests a more collaborative model of brain function where conscious and unconscious processes work together to shape our behavior.
This whole conversation has been a mind-expanding experience. It's made me realize how much we still have to learn about the brain and how it orchestrates the symphony of our lives.
It truly is a frontier of scientific exploration. And as we continue to delve deeper into the mysteries of the brain, I'm sure we'll uncover even more awe-inspiring insights into the nature of consciousness, behavior, and what it means to be human.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this incredible deep dive into the world of neuroscience.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you've enjoyed exploring these groundbreaking findings with us.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you. And to all our listeners out there, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep those brains buzzing.
Until next time, stay curious.